As digital transformation continues to drive change throughout the higher education sector, one of the results of this is the need for universities to build digital estates to complement their physical ones. I'll now hand over to Gary so he can share some insights from EAB's work with university during the recent period.
Excellent. Thank you, Alistair. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Gary Guadagnolo. I am beaming into your homes and offices and wherever else you may be joining the symposium from Washington, D.C. As Alistair mentioned, I am a director of research at EAB, which is a global research firm working on behalf of a network of almost 3,000 higher education institutions around the globe. We're a proud sponsor of Times Higher Education Estates Management Symposium, as it aligns well with our mission to bring together leaders to discuss and find solutions to thorny issues facing our sector. Today, I'll be sharing with you a few snapshots of some of the research we've been conducting on the topic of digital transformation. Now, if you roll your eyes at that term, it's okay. Digital transformation has become the buzziest of buzzwords over the course of the past year. Rorschach tests for anything one might think is good or bad in higher education, either a panacea or a poison pill. But in the wake of a pandemic-induced shift to remote instruction and operations, there's no denying the evolution of sector-wide attitudes on the role of digital technologies. The question on leaders' minds is therefore less about whether to pursue a digital transformation agenda, but rather which of the many opportunities should be prioritized and how quickly progress can be made. In just a little bit, I'll be joined by one of these leaders, Stephen Talboys, Director of Technology and Estates and Facilities at York, to talk through these issues in more depth. But first, I wanted to take a few minutes to get on the same page about digital transformation, as I think it'll help frame not just the plenary session here today, but the rest of the presentations today as well. So let me make sure I can advance the slides here. Here we go. All right. Well, I'm beginning here with hopefully a lighthearted snapshot of what we've heard from many universities. Maybe you're feeling something similar to the CIO I've quoted here on the slide, overwhelmed by the number of vendors who have come knocking on your door with digital tools and solutions to the challenges of the past year. Some are specifically designed to respond to the pandemic and get your campuses up and running again, like UV ray robots or wearable tech. Others are more generally looking to help usher in an era of better remote learning and instruction, anticipating greater demand for flexible learning environments in the years to come. Well, honestly, I could have filled up 10 slides with examples of new technologies and digital interventions making their way onto our campuses. But I think this does beg the question, is this the digital transformation we were promised? Well, maybe so, but maybe not. There's no denying digital transformation is on almost everyone's minds. In response to consumer and environmental pressures amplified by the pandemic, the sector is embracing digital change like never before. But like many buzzwords, the term is only useful in the context of a shared definition. Here's how we at EAB explain digital transformation. It's the process of using digital tools, specifically data and technology, to deliver value and drive change. The emphasis here is not on technology for the sake of technology, but on the application of that technology to address strategic goals and operational challenges. The rapid scaling and widespread adoption of the solution in turn creates a culture of continuous improvement that sets the stage for further transformation. I've been hearing more people talk about this, not necessarily even as digital transformation, but as digital evolution, something that is an ongoing process. But digital transformation is the word that has seemed to stick. It is this kind of catch-all phrase for ongoing innovation and technology-driven change, with a particular emphasis on that which disrupts the status quo. So anything from service innovations and workflow efficiency initiatives to completely new program modalities or radically re-engineered business models. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the past year has radically altered both the scope and opportunity for realizing digital change. Wanted to walk through on this slide 5 observations about the evolution of digital transformation in the sector. Let me walk you through them, and would love to see in the chat if any of these trends resonate with you, what you might add on or modify with these as well. Now, on the first row, we were previously optimistic that digital investments could differentiate your institution in the market and expand value. Given the sector's general sluggishness to embrace digital change prior to a year ago, snazzy digital projects used to help you stand out from the majority of the institutions operating in more of a wait and see mode about what investments would prove effective. But now digital investments are necessary to avoid falling behind the pack. The great leap forward of 2020 in terms of both universities' capabilities and students' expectations means that digital experiences are now table stakes. Take virtual tours, for example. That was a nice to have in a pre-pandemic world. Now it's safe to say students expect these types of experiences to help them make their decisions. The second row, we used to estimate that you're probably spending about 80% of your digital transformation energies on convincing others of the need for change and 20% on implementation. Now that's flipped with 20% of energies on change management and 80% on implementation. Most stakeholders on campus hopefully have awoken to the need for digital transformation. The new challenge is allocating limited resources and time when both are at a premium. On to the next row. Previously, our goal was to move analog products and services onto a digital platform in response to digital native demands. We were largely reactive to our perceptions of digital natives as always being on their phones and wanting to do everything electronically. We now realize that digital initiatives should have divergent aims, replacing and streamlining transactional services while enhancing and supporting the learning experience. The idea here is to make everything outside the classroom as easy and simple as possible, so students can focus on being challenged in the classroom rather than outside it. Let's see, make sure we get the next one. Fourth, we used to focus on how digital tools could improve the on-campus experience of students and staff by deploying a web of interconnected applications and tools. The goal was to improve digital infrastructures to make life on campus easier and more seamless. But now we're taking a more expansive view of campus, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in this session. And the idea here is that students and staff should have access regardless of geographic or financial barriers. Widening access to university must account for digital poverty and the need to work and learn from anywhere. Finally, the goal used to be to unlock a new operational end state. So we used to do X, now we're going to do Y with the help of these digital tools. Today, we see the opportunity to unlock an agile operating environment. Another word we can unpack another time, but here the idea is that you can pivot between modalities based on need. So we used to do A, now we can do B, C, and or D. Digital dexterity is more important than shifting from one mode of operations to a new one. Now, as I said before, even if the context around digital transformation has evolved, the core definition, using data and technology to drive widespread change, remains the same. On both sides of the pandemic, moving from a public declaration of a commitment to digital transformation to actual impact has been no easy task. The culprit from our point of view is twofold: barriers to innovation and barriers to scale. Many institutions find themselves stuck in one of two scenarios, and I'll explain these with this 2x2 graph on the slide. So on the y-axis, we've plotted the scale of projects, and on the x-axis is innovation. Most initiatives are concentrated in the top left quadrant or the bottom right. Let me draw your attention first to the top left. Projects in this quadrant are easy to scale across campus, but aren't necessarily the most innovative. These types of projects are what we call digital substitution. In other words, a new technology replaces an analog way of working without significantly improving the value, cost, or experience. In this scenario, scale is easier to achieve because the barriers related to changing existing infrastructure, business processes, and roles and responsibilities are lower. For example, if you've adopted a new ERP but left all of the underlying processes and roles and responsibilities untouched, you've done little more than to swap out the existing way of working for one with a few more clicks on the computer. It may not be as transformative as you think. Now, in the bottom right quadrant, these projects are highly innovative but difficult to scale, what we might think of as innovation theater. Genuinely new approaches and technologies pop up around campus, but they remain isolated, subscale, and consequently, the worry here is of limited strategic impact. For example, think of a number of campuses that have piloted VR tools for classroom learning. Maybe your campus has done so, but These often tend to be isolated attempts led by a single technical fellow or academic staff member with a particular passion. Oftentimes, if that person leaves the institution, so does that particular application of the innovation. Now, don't get me wrong, digital substitution and innovative pilots are great places to start, and they have their own merits. But if the goal is to pursue transformation, we have to overcome both scale and innovation barriers, introducing new ways of delivering core services, and doing so in a way that allows for the greatest opportunities for financial, operational, or mission impact. From EAB's perspective, there are 6 domains in which investments in digital change consistently yield positive results, and will put you in that upper right-hand quadrant that I was just talking about of digital transformation. And while specific technologies and vendors may come and go, focusing on these domains, in other words, the type of institution you're looking to become, will keep you on the path towards transformation. Now, in the interest of time, I'm just going to give you a short descriptor for each of these 6. The first of these domains is related to enrollment, namely creating personalized multi-channel prospect communications. Responding to sophisticated applicant behaviors, institutions have to reposition their messaging from what's great about us to what we can do for you, all at new levels of convenience, relevance, and speed. Next, in the student-facing domain, creating frictionless student services and success-oriented interventions. Digital investments in student support should not only enable hyper-convenient access to routine services, but also proactively nudge students towards behaviors associated with academic success and personal well-being. Next, in the learning and teaching domain, focusing on multimodal instruction for career exploration and lifelong learning. This has been a big topic of conversation recently, but flexible multimodal course formats enable student-centered experiential education across career and personal milestones, serving as an on-ramp for the lifelong learner models many of us have been discussing recently. Next, in the domain of professional services, pursuing business processes that are aligned with customer needs. This can be seen in the standardization and automation of administrative tasks to free up staff time, and the democratization of business intelligence analytics to support better frontline decision-making. Fifth, in the campus estate, moving towards a predictive operations and space management model through real-time monitoring and analysis. And finally, thinking about the student experience post-graduation in terms of maintaining curated, value-driven alumni and donor engagement. As you think about digital transformation, I'd encourage you to look for these signals on your campus, elsewhere around you, as you're reading through the daily Times Higher Education briefing. Think about for your campus, which of these signals are strong and which need to be amplified. We believe that investing and boosting these signals will have the greatest chance of actually transforming how universities operate. Now, without a doubt, there's a lot more that could be said here. In our virtual booth, we can share with you a white paper that unpacks the high investments in each of these areas. But for a second, I just want to touch on 2 to help bring these ideas to life. The first digital snapshot I'll walk through today comes from Staffordshire University. You may know that they developed a digital coach called Beacon. It's like your Alexa or Siri assistant. It can respond to a standard set of questions and prompts. Interestingly, though, Staffordshire designed it to do more than that. They've been experimenting with the use of nudges to non-intrusively intervene and promote student success-oriented behaviors. Staffordshire was the first UK provider to launch an AI digital coach in this fashion. So we're on the same page. Nudges are based on institutional data of specific behaviors that lead to student engagement, retention, or attainment. These behaviors can be as simple as attending class or student involvement in societies or other extracurricular activities. And if a student is flagged as disengaged, a nudge can broker them towards an appropriate intervention. The example here from Staffordshire, leaders there noticed that many students were failing to make appointments with their personal tutors, who were waiting for students to raise their hand and seek out their assistance and help. Those few students who did make those appointments were more likely to succeed and graduate and complete their course. So based on that realization, staffs initiated a nudge campaign to push students towards making appointments with their personal tutors right at the start of the academic year. So Beacon was deployed to send a proactive message like the one that you could think about saying, hey, you get a text, you know that your personal tutor is Dr. Staff's Beacon. You can reach out to her for advice. And this one nudge campaign resulted in 300 new student-tutor relationships. Now, if you think back to the definition on that 2x2 of digital transformation that I shared earlier, it's a new way of thinking about interacting and influencing student behavior. And in this case, the use of a technological tool, the app here, helped to do that at scale. And the second example I wanted to share with you comes from the University of Central Florida here in the US. Central Florida was an early mover in creating a more hybrid learning environment for students, a reality we've all become much more accustomed to over the course of this past year. Central Florida has an extremely large student population and has sought to open up access to those who may have not otherwise pursue a university degree. But we also know that students at times can struggle with balancing a standard timetable of modules with personal and work responsibilities. So leaders at the University of Central Florida made a big investment in transforming the pedagogical approach of its academic staff, dialing up the multimodal aspect to eliminate distinctions between in-person and online experiences. The quote on the bottom right of this slide from the Vice Provost for Digital Learning captures an ethos that I think many of us are hoping to implement on our own campuses. Classifying a student as main campus or extended campus or distance becomes meaningless in an environment where students take whatever courses they need and whatever location or modality best suits their requirements at the time. And that is a transformed experience for students. Now, if we had all the time in the world, could go on and on about cool apps and learning tools and fault detection centers and sensors and cleaning robots and many more examples. But be remiss if I didn't come back in wrapping up this first section of the presentation to the point that digital transformation is not about technology per se. Without a doubt, new and emerging technologies and digital solutions offer exciting possibilities for transforming core strategic and operational activities. But more than any tool, app, or interface, the leadership of a university will be the most influential in determining the success of digital transformation activities. Innovation thrives only in the right environment, in a culture of collaboration, risk-taking, and business partnership across the organization provides the most fertile ground for digital endeavors. Driving successful change and improving value for students and staff means finding support among the people and processes that govern the institution. Without that, institutions will see technology spend rising with little to show for their investments in terms of true change. To foster digital success, institutions have to elevate leadership awareness of technology-enabled capabilities and incorporate more value-focused problem-solving models of thinking. On the right of this slide, I included a leadership checklist for those pursuing institution-wide digital transformation ambitions. Maybe you need to take a screenshot and send it to a few of your peers. Feel free to do that. And of course, we'll be sharing slides with you at the end of the session. But when senior leaders share a common framework for problem solving and for understanding and evaluating digital opportunities, those are the campuses that will see better outcomes. And with that, on this note of the necessity of leaders committed to change, I'm proud to welcome to the virtual stage with me Stephen Talboys, who's Director of Technology, Estates, and Facilities at the University of York. Thought Stephen's perspective would be really interesting to share as he's in charge of creating the right physical and virtual environments in which York can realize its mission. Stephen has had a distinguished career across many different sectors, helping to drive change and build up both IT and physical infrastructure. So Stephen, thank you for joining me. We'll, as I said earlier, encourage anyone to submit questions that you may have over the next few minutes. We'll try to leave some space for them at the end of our chat. So Stephen, welcome.
Good morning, Gary.
Yes, good morning.
And good morning, everyone else.
One of the reasons I'm really excited for you to be with us, Stephen, is that you have stepped into a fairly unique role in the sector with managerial oversight of both estates and IT. I thought that would be a really interesting and valuable perspective to bring to this presentation as it's on digital transformation at a virtual summit for estates leaders and to give a little bit of perspective there. To start with, can you share a little bit about the strategic decision at York to bring these two areas of estates and IT together under a single remit?
Yeah, no problem, Gary. So we have a fairly new Vice Chancellor, been with us just under a couple of years, 18 months or so. So he has brought in some new thinking and is putting together a new university strategy. And then when you add to that the opportunity that COVID working has brought us, it's accelerated some thinking about how we bring together the estates and virtual aspects of what we do to provide a much more integrated service and experience for our students and for our staff. And if I think about my children, I'm still of a generation where I used to talk about going upstairs to go online. Whereas with my children, they just live in a world that's some part physical and some part virtual. And they don't distinguish between the two. So what we're really after is trying to create that immersive experience where students and staff don't really think about whether they're in the physical or virtual world. They're just living as they would at home. And they get on with their teaching, their learning, their research without a thought about whether they're virtual or physical. So that's the vision. And it's all about driving that great student and staff experience.
Great, thank you. I know you've had a similar position at Salford, but I was wondering if you could draw on your experience both there and at York. Talk to us a little bit about the opportunities that this dual oversight role of estates and IT provides from a management and organizational and strategic perspective. And then maybe compare that as well with the fact that I'm sure you'd be the first to admit that this is not a cure-all for those thinking about striking the right balance between the physical and digital estate.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunities are large. There is a number of things that can come together more easily by bringing teams under one leadership. I was interested in your slide earlier about the sort of opportunities for digital transformation proper rather than digital substitution or some of the other things that were on your slide, personalization of the journey for students, multimodal teaching, improvement in business processes, predictive estate management models, all those kind of things are all things we aspire to. In our case in York, we haven't particularly invested that well in our estate. Our estate is old and tired. And the bill for fixing our estate is very, very large. It's probably in the order of 70 or 80 million pounds of backlog. And we've got a number of new buildings, but we've got some very old buildings that are all built in the 60s. So the estate transformation is a really, really big challenge. That would cost us a lot of money and take a lot of time. So one of the big opportunities for us is how do we, with our investment plan, decide what to put into the estate, because we do need to fix that long-term challenge of poor condition, and what do we decide to put into digital. We also felt over the last year that we've invested in some areas enough, but in many areas not enough in digital. And what COVID has taught us is that actually you can get more bang for your buck with digital. So if you were to increase our investment in enterprise systems, where we spend typically 3 million or so a year on renewing software and systems and building some of our own, if we increase that by 30% or 50%, that would have a massive impact on our business. But putting an extra £1 million into our estate plan has very little impact. Now, in a traditional model where you have the COO or registrar in university, and then you typically have an IT director, you typically have an estates director, you'd be creating a tension where if you were suggesting taking money out of the estate to put into digital, you'd immediately put two of your key senior officials into tension. Mm-hmm. What this role gives me the opportunity to do is to carefully balance where we put the money and why. And perhaps in the first few years of our new strategy, it's about a greater emphasis on digital and a lesser emphasis on the estate. And that's partly to enable us to grow our business, to create more surpluses. And then once those surpluses are created, we can then begin to go through the long-term transformation of the estate as well. So for us, it's about doing both. It's about recognizing that doing digital first can have a bigger impact. Mm-hmm. As we found through COVID, it creates different ways of working and opens up new opportunities. You sort of asked the question about whether it's a cure-all or not. No, I don't think it is. And other universities are looking at this differently. Many are trying to create a smarter campus. And some are doing that through estates and IT colleagues working together to create a combined strategy, or to have their own strategy that's then in some case interconnected to create that smarter campus. Mm-hmm. In our case, it just happens to be we're trying to do that through the line management, but in other places
Mm-hmm.
it can work equally well through people working together across different teams.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I like what you were saying earlier too about even thinking about the kind of investments and where you are kind of accelerating investments or perhaps momentarily pulling back. I mean, it reminds me of almost kind of a investment portfolio, right? That it's all kind of trying to advance the same larger strategic objectives, but you're also thinking about where, in the short term, do we invest or kind of pull back to make sure that there's the right balance that is getting you where you want to go as an institution.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that in a pragmatic and practical sense is that we're now having some very real conversations. When a academic colleague comes to me and says, I've got this problem, I need to teach more students or I have to accommodate more academic staff because we're growing. This isn't by any means something we fixed, but it's a conversation we're starting to have. We're starting to say, well, would digital help? Can we do that digitally rather than asking me just to provide you with more space? And we've got a longer term program to sort of think through what our workplace looks like post-COVID. And probably that means more people will work from home more of the time. But there's still this almost counterweight or predisposition to coming having a conversation with me with my estates hat on first and saying, can I have some more desks? And I'm trying to say, yeah, we can talk about that, but can we first have a conversation about what you're trying to do? Because if you're trying to suddenly teach another couple of hundred students, haven't we found over the last year that they responded really well to having large lectures online? And that's the feedback we got from them. They don't want to have seminars online. They want to have some face-to-face teaching and some practicals and some laboratories and some role play and some of that kind of stuff more physically. But they're more than happy to sit in a large lecture online. So why are you asking me to provide more space for teachers to come on campus to teach people? And why are you asking me for more space for lectures when we've proven there's a better model?
Right. Yeah, I like that. It's kind of leading with as I was alluding to earlier, kind of the question or the business problem that you're trying to solve in terms of why we would be pursuing this, not technology for the sake of technology, or perhaps as you were saying, the kind of inverse, not having technology at all, but what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to solve here? Stephen, I know that you at York have been working on a new infrastructure strategy for moving forward in a post-pandemic world. I'll ask our moderator to put back up that one slide that you had shared with me, but I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about the direction you're headed and what the overall philosophy, if you can even call it that at this point, but kind of the thinking about this interplay between the digital and physical world, and whether you're thinking about any big bets in either or both terrains.
Yeah, no problem, Gary. So we, as I said earlier, are producing a new strategy. That's got to the point where, as a university, we've got 5 themes. We know surprises to those of you on the call that there's something about research, something about education and teaching. In our case, there's something quite important about partnerships and our role in providing public good for society. And then there's something about a lasting legacy that we will leave as we move on and think about what we've achieved and as the university goes on into the future. The 5th bit of that strategy is what's called Agile, Able and Aligned, which is our catchphrase and theme for what professional services need to do to support the academics in delivering their endeavour of research and teaching. And therefore, the infrastructure plan needs to sit under that Agile, Able and Aligned kind of banner. These are my thoughts. This isn't what could be argued to be decided upon as the university's strategy for infrastructure. This is just my initial thinking, having reflected on where we've got to with our strategy. And some of this I think will resonate with others, but some of it might be specific to York. But from our point of view, my vision really is that from a digital perspective, when I'm at home, if I want to buy a new tax disc for my car, I can do it on my phone in about 5 minutes. That used to be a paper process until a few years ago. It's really simple. You go on your phone, you press a few buttons and you've done it. You don't even get a piece of paper through the post anymore to stick in your car window. It's all done digitally. And yet at work, I come to work and I've got 15 screens to get through and I've got 6 different logins on different things and I've got clunky technology to use. It's the opposite of intuitive. And I think the challenge with that is that it puts people off being inventive and asking us to do more stuff digitally and certainly to become adept in digital transformation. We're a long way off that because the stuff we've given people to work with is quite old-fashioned. So for us, it's about more intuitive systems that are easier to use, we've got too many, so there has to be some kind of cull as we go forward with that. What we've discovered as we've begun to discuss Agile Aim and Aligned is that digital literacy is a challenge. We have mixed digital literacy across the university. We have people that are really, really good at using learning and teaching tools that are digital. We have people that are quite poor. We have support staff that are good digitally and support staff that aren't. So that's a big challenge for us, I think, in enabling this digital transformation. We also have an information governance challenge in how we bring all our data together into one place for one version of the truth to make decisions from. And then, as all of us have had to reflect on over the last 6 months or so, universities have now become targets for cybersecurity and for breaches and the like. So that's another part of what will probably become our strategy. Tying into the agility point, we want to be able to do things quickly, efficiently. My tax disk example would be where we'd aspire to do many of our processes. And importantly we're one of the smaller Russell Group universities, we want to grow. So we've got to be able to align our services to support the growth that we want to see in the academic part of the business. And of course, we have to deliver with all of our compliance. So that's the digital side. Take the physical side, it's very similar in that we also want to have space that people like, the equivalent of being intuitive. If people are happy using our spaces, again, we want to support strategic growth. And we also have lots of challenges about the size of the state. We want to reduce it, and we want to reduce the amount of carbon we use. We want to reduce the footprint per person. And again, we realise that people now want to come on campus for different things. They want to be on campus to collaborate, to do the physical things I talked about earlier. From the estate itself, we want to make more income out of the estate. We want to find commercial opportunities from it. And again, we have to make sure the estate runs in a compliant way. When you bring all that together, you kind of end up with what might be a Venn diagram of trying to get to higher customer satisfaction levels, supporting the growth I've talked about, better information management and ability for people to bump into each other to collaborate about what matters, and then a smarter campus where we're using digitally enabled processes more of the time, but we're also overall meeting what we're required to from a regulatory point of view. So those are my initial thoughts. There's a long way to go within the university in discussing what all of that means, but that's where I'm kind of coming from in an infrastructure planning sense.
No, it's a really exciting direction of travel, and I want to come back to what you were just saying about the smart campus. But I was particularly struck about what you were saying a minute ago: the need for digital literacy, better data governance, data security. All of these are kind of core aspects of digital transformation that perhaps are not the sexiest ones, but have to be progressing apace, because otherwise you kind of make all of these investments in new tools, and if no one knows how to use them, or they create all of these challenges in terms of security, then that's not the desired outcome either. But you touched on just a second ago this idea of smart campus, and I think that's where many people, perhaps outside of the folks on the call today, would think of when they think of digital transformation. All the cool things that are going on campus. There is optimism that students will be back this autumn en masse, and that they will be kind of engaging in campus and student life on the physical campus in new and different ways. What are some of the kind of decisions or issues that you're weighing about smart campus investments specifically at York?
We're not as far on as maybe some others in the sector are, and certainly aren't as far on as some of the other sectors maybe that we compare ourselves with. From our perspective, we've done a lot with Wi-Fi data, particularly over the last year, to spot where people are, to stop people gathering together in large groups to sort of meet the COVID rules, but also to understand which of our students are back on campus currently. We get a sort of proxy for that through Wi-Fi data. And we've been using that to get a sense of where people go on campus. So we know where the footfall should be, and where perhaps we're planning new cafes or nodes where people want to congregate. We know where those would work best. So there's a little bit of that going on. And we've got some occupier sensors that we've put into one of our newer buildings to see how the building's being used, to allow us to feed back into other projects. That's particularly around the use of offices by academics, which I know is a thorny issue of how do we have that difficult conversation about, well, you're only in 1 day a week, so why do you have your own office? And we've got some more of that to do on another building, which we're just about to finish with our management school, Some of the smart stuff around the estate has sat within estates because we run timetabling as part of one of our services, and we also have audio visual. So we've had our own bit of tech that we've been looking after for quite a while, even when I was estates director, and I've delivered a number of IT projects from that vantage point as sponsor. But I couldn't say to you, come on our campus, it's really whizzy. We've got it all sorted. We've got a student app that we've got up and running, but it's still being developed to have all the functionality that we want. We still rely on old-fashioned signs stuck in the ground, which feels odd to me. At what point can we move to having a digital wayfinding approach where people turn up with an app or get the QR code and off they go with their phone, following their phone around the campus? So we're by no means leaders in how to create a smart campus, but what we're hoping is that with this bringing together of estates and IT into one team, that perhaps we can catch up a bit and maybe even leapfrog in some areas.
For sure. We can bring you back in a year to see if you've solved the academic staff office challenge. And I'm sure
maybe in a decade.
Exactly. But you just raised an interesting point that I wanted to touch on. And I think over the past, certainly 5 years, maybe even 10 years, we have seen as the estates group itself has become more digitally competent and aware and investing in new tools, that there has been this kind of creation of sometimes almost kind of shadow IT teams in estates. And I think that bringing the two groups together under your remit probably has some opportunities there to help bring those two teams together, to think about how they can be better at working and collaborating and driving kind of knowledge. I know these still may be early days and there can be challenges here, but what have you learned or seen, or what are your plans in terms of thinking of the IT group and the estates group as teams that can and should be working together and collaborating with this idea of the single university campus, be it either digital or physical?
Good question, that. And it gets into the heart of some of the cultural challenge that we need to work through as a new, bigger department. So if I ask my estates director colleagues, should I move the estate and campus services business systems IT team into IT proper, they're going to say no, because they like having that team with a closer proximity embedded within their localness and in them being able to direct what they do. So that would be they'd say no, that isn't going to work. If I ask the IT director, what would you like to do? Oh, I'd love to consolidate. And we've got some really good people there. They could do more stuff across the campus that would help other parts of the university. So for us, there's a bit of a tension we need to work through. We need to see what the right answer is for York in that sense. But one of the things we're pushing in York is not to worry quite so much about who the line manager is, but we're thinking more across professional services and across the university as a whole. How do we agree on a common purpose, and what team do we need to put together to deliver that common purpose? So if you're delivering a new space or a new environment, what physical people around the estates, what sort of digital expertise, what HR, cultural expertise do you need to put into a project? So we're doing something in a minute around workplace, and we've got a project trying to think about what the workplace of the future is, with a particular focus on professional services offices, and later on we may pick up the issue of academic offices. And we're trying to see what we could achieve for September, which is our kind of notional line in the sand of when some sense of normality might return, as you said, when students may well come back physically to campus and that kind of thing. And that's a project we're just doing differently. We've got IT people and estates people and HR colleagues, and then academics and others as kind of representatives of the stakeholder group. They're just in a project team that I oversee. And we've got more of that developing, more of this matrix management approach where it doesn't matter quite so much which team you're in. It's more about you working together to solve a problem.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it's back to that idea of the problem-oriented solutions, figuring out those and bringing together the right people for that.
And what's been great, Gary, about the last year is that COVID has really accelerated that. We had to do some of these things really quickly without committees and papers and all the things universities love. And we went, as many universities have done, I'm sure colleagues around the room listening to this will agree, we went from being a physical campus that taught mostly physically in rooms to an online business in about 3 days. And that required a whole load of different colleagues to work together really quickly in teams to close the campus and get that digital infrastructure in place. And then equally, as we unlocked and came out of the lockdown, we did the reverse, but again, we did it really quickly. Some of that project-based working has broken down the barriers and created that sense of togetherness and that common purpose. And as we come out of COVID lockdowns, we don't want to lose some of that. We want to keep that agile decision-making, that matrix management, that common purpose. Now, it'll be difficult because people will want to revert back to what they know of how they used to work on campus, but we're trying quite hard to make sure that we really learn from COVID and take the best from it and dial that into the way our business and our business processes work going forward.
Great.
Sorry,
we're almost at the time. Alistair was going to kick it over for you.
Sorry to interrupt. It's been really interesting to think you discuss it and getting these insights from both the EAB and from Stephen. We've got time for one question from the audience that came through, which speaks to Stephen's point, I think, about how the future of the academic programs. It's interesting about looking at digital as a solution. Is it becoming more a part of your role to advise on how to deliver learning, and how do you think the digital model will persist? I mean, I think you've partly answered the second half of that question just now, but to speak about the academic programs, have you had many conversations about that yet, and how much is it being brought together?
Yes, we have. That's quite live for us. We've got a whole load of work streams around becoming a semesterized university and getting common credit modules and thinking about what programs you want to teach going forward and what we don't. So there are, in that project, or in those projects, there are some IT people, then we have some learning and technology people which sit within student services, and then we have the PVC for learning, teaching and the like. So that's got some of my teams involved, but it's a different Venn diagram when joined in with other people. So we are looking at some of that, and of course that has to read across to space. If you can do more digitally, you need less space, and vice versa. So it is a conversation that's live, but again, it's quite an early one for us. We're not by any means leaders in how we have moved to a digital platform as opposed to having lots of people sat in a room. In terms of post-COVID anyway, that people have accepted that during COVID. I'm not sure we've got that agreement to do that going forward.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's been really interesting when you look at some of the reportings and the opinion columns we've had in THE over the past year about this. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm towards the digital transformation as a whole because of the freedom it can grant to both teachers and researchers. But within that, there's the balancing act that you mentioned previously about, certain people will want to align teams in certain ways. And it's interesting at York, you've resulted in this kind of matrix leadership model, because it seems like a really practical solution to an ongoing challenge. And I think that'll be one of the interesting things to see how this continues as we evolve going forward. That puts us at time, I'm afraid. So I'd like to thank Gary and Stephen for their contributions today. And I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.